The AD Luka trade somehow found a way to look even worse. The Lakers actually cancel a trade, and are the Knicks or Rockets ready for a real playoff run? We play sus or sustainable today on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Doug Branson, host of Locked On Hornets, and your Shot Clock Sherpa, guiding you through the NBA's biggest stories with the help of Locked On's local experts. And with me are two of Locked On's premier national NBA experts from the Locked On Nuggets podcast and senior NBA writer for the Action Network. We have Matt Moore. And from the Locked On Bulls podcast, we have Hayes. Matt and Hayes, football. Time to get out of the way. This is the NBA's time now. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go. I always like this time, the time after the Super Bowl where you kind of switch. You know, we've only got a month till March Madness, and then all the draft stuff will kick up, and then like the end of the playoff race and all the seeding standings and everybody jockeying for position. And then we're into the magical month of April and playoffs. I can't wait.
And Hayes, the Bulls and the Hornets, they'll be jockeying for position of another kind, right? They'll be jockeying for
lottery position. Yay.
All right, let's talk about this AD Luka trade. I mentioned it in the cold open. It's not looking great. Anthony Davis made his debut for the Mavericks and put up insane numbers, unprecedented numbers in the first half. 24 points, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocks. No one's done that in a half in the play-by-play era, but he left the game in the third quarter with a non-contact injury that we now know is a left adductor strain that's going to keep him out for several weeks at least. Matt, I feel like all the questions that are available to ask on this have super obvious answers, but I'll ask one anyways. Should the Mavericks have expected all of this to go this poorly, this quickly?
Yes. Yes, you should have. You trade Luka Doncic. You trade Luka Doncic for Anthony Davis. You trade Luka Doncic because you thought he was injured too much, so you trade him for Anthony Davis. What were you thinking? I made a list this weekend on a Substack, Hayes, of just all the dumb things about this trade. I'm at 27, and then I asked people to add some, and they've added 7 more. By the end of the season, we're going to be at like 50 reasons the trade was dumb, and everyone knew it. Davis went out there and absolutely clocked an undersized Rockets team. They started Steven Adams in the second half, and he started to struggle, and then he got hurt. It was like the entire Anthony Davis experience in a microcosm sped up on time lapse. It's just shocking that it's like the universe being like, the universe is yelling at Nico Harrison. What were you thinking?
This is this is the worst way that it could have possibly went. Like, I get it, the AD looked great for a second there, but like the fact that in the first game, first game that you ran into all the talk, and this is the thing that I didn't understand. I get it. If you want to have legitimate concerns about Luka Doncic and his conditioning, that's one thing. But you traded the legitimate concerns about Luka at 25 and his conditioning for an over 30-year-old guy whose nickname is Street Clothes because of how often he's injured. And you completely overvalued that. It's hilarious is what it is. Like, this is the karma that Nico Harrison deserves.
Point of order, I do think that the better nickname for him is Anthony Day to Davis.
Day to Davis, yes, that's a really good one as well.
Okay, you mentioned, Matt, that the universe is yelling at the Dallas Mavericks. The universe not the only ones that are yelling. Their own fans are yelling at the Dallas Mavericks right now. And I'm not sure that these comments by Mavericks governor and Las Vegas Sands COO Patrick Dumont are going to make things better, but he did make his first public comments since the trade to the Dallas Morning News. Here's Locked On Mavericks host Nick Angstead, barely hanging on with the quotes and the reaction.
The thing that I just still can't get over is why they're still kicking Luka Doncic on the way out. What's the point for it? Why do you have to still, on the way out, say things like this, quote, "In my mind, the way teams win is by focus, having the right character, by having the right culture, and having the right dedication to work as hard as possible to create a championship-winning outcome. And if you're not doing that, you're going to lose." He's talking about Luka. He says, if you look at the greats of the league, the people you and I grew up with, if you look at the greats of this league, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Kobe Bryant, Shaq, They worked really hard every day with a singular focus to win. And if you don't have that, it doesn't work. And if you don't have that, you shouldn't be part of the Dallas Mavericks. Like, you have to deal with some crazy if you want to get the genius. And Luka is a genius basketball player. Shaq had issues with his weight all the time. Larry Bird talked about how much beer he would drink all the time. More than Luka, for sure. Kobe Bryant had issues. Michael Jordan would stay out at all hours of the night gambling. Is that dedication? Is that character? Is that culture? Is that what Patrick Dumont is referring to?
You can see it in the eyes. You can hear it in the laugh. He's barely hanging on there, Nick Angstead. We're worried about you, and we care about you. Hayes, these comments by Patrick Dumont, they made things worse, right?
Yes, absolutely. They make things worse. Like, it's just, like I said, I can understand legitimate concerns about Luka's conditioning. But the fact that it's like this continued, now we have to try to tear down Luka to make this decision that we made seem better, just honestly just highlights how bad of a decision it is. Like, you should have been able to like at least try. Like we said before many times, start a bidding war, something. Like, you literally went for the lowest common denominator in anything that you could do, and now you're crapping on Luka on his way out. Like, Luka, throughout all of that, he's always had some conditioning issues, but throughout all of that, he's still your second best player, and some would even say the best player in your franchise's entire history. It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense, is right, which is why like players have talked about this, and everyone I keep talking to about it around the league is still like, something doesn't make sense. Like, there is something we're missing. And there's great reporters on the ground like Mark Stein, Hall of Famer, like Tim Cato of DLLS, Tim McMahon of ESPN, and nobody I don't think has gotten to it. This smells personal. Like, this isn't just because there's no reason to keep going at it. You can talk about like you're defending yourself, right? But it's like Angstad says, there's no point in it. So the only reason that you keep doing that is because there is some sort of divide between the organization and Luka Doncic and his representation over something. And who knows what that is. But I will tell you, like, it is impressive. You lost your best player to the Los Angeles Lakers, and you made him the good guy. Do you know how hard that is? Do you know how difficult that is to do? It's absolutely an incredible botching of PR on top of botching the trade.
The craziest thing about the comments from Dumont was that, and I know he was referencing players that he grew up with. That's what he said in the statements. But like Dirk Nowitzki is right there, a guy that would have been the like perfect example for what he was talking about. Instead, he picked a lot of players that, as Nick outlined there, were more aligned with Luka than anyone. All right. We'll keep talking about this more as the days and weeks develop. But let's stay with this trade, but we're going to flip it over to Los Angeles, where the Lakers actually rescinded a trade for Hornets big Mark Williams after Williams reportedly failed a Lakers physical. The Kamenetsky brothers of Locked On Lakers provide some color.
I suspect that it is not the Lakers deciding at the 11th hour that they don't want to do this, because that if that gets out, good luck getting other teams to deal with you on big moves, particularly if you're Rob Pelinka. And speaking frankly, most of the GMs around the league, from everything I've heard, don't like you anyway. And they're not that excited to do deals with you anyway. If you all of a sudden, on top of whatever they already don't like about you, have a reputation as somebody that'll go back on your word because #reasons, good luck moving forward.
Yeah, I agree.
But the reason I think it is very possible that ultimately neither side did anything wrong here is it is possible that what eventually we will learn spooked the Lakers is something the Hornets weren't even aware of, because it's something they weren't looking for because they didn't have a reason to be looking for it.
Yeah, rare occurrence, a trade getting canceled in the NBA, but it does happen. Matt, what was your reaction when you saw the news? Was it the right move for a Lakers team that was pretty desperate for a center, and now they don't have one?
I mean, I was shocked, but if they found something that's that concerning, I think it's got to be an issue. I'm a little reluctant to say that it's something that we don't necessarily know of, or that they weren't aware of, because a lot of times teams are aware of issues and they're like, yeah, we're not worried about it. Like, yeah, he's got this concern, but we're not worried about it. And the other team's like, we're very concerned about it because their medical team is different. The other thing I'll say is ultimately this is a failure on the part of the Lakers. Before you get the official medicals, you can do intel. People talk too much in this league. And all that stuff gets circled around. There's always stuff like this that gets circled around. You should have had some sort of idea. If you were blindsided by this, it's not entirely on you, but it's a little on you for not doing the intel work.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we know that Mark Williams has had injury concerns his entire 2-3 years in the NBA so far. So you would like to think that they kind of knew that there was going to be something there, maybe some signs for concern even before you agree to this trade. Now, we don't know exactly what was found, and there is a chance that whatever was there was so much more concerning or paint such a bad picture that the Lakers just they know that they can't really take that on. Even with knowing they have to try to start building around Luka soon. So maybe there's that aspect of it, but I still look at this as mainly a fell on the Lakers side because they could have spent that time at the trade deadline making a move for another center because there were a lot available. Not many of them really moved. So, and they could always kick it down to the offseason, but this does look like something like, all right, Lakers, what are you doing here?
Doug, how excited are you to have a player that your own team didn't want back on the team and you don't get the draft picks?
He's back. Well, if I will say, if Rob Pelinka had been watching Locked On Hornets every day, if he had been an everydayer, he would have had the intel on Mark Williams. We've been talking about this for a while, his body not looking right. But on the Lakers side, they had a need. They knew for a long time they needed a center, and they waited until the very end of the deadline. And then after the deadline, they couldn't even make an amendment on the trade like the Sixers did with the Caleb Martin deal. You can make amendments, but not after the deadline is over. So turn your homework in early, Rob Pelinka. That would be my message. Okay, coming up on the Locked On NBA podcast, Jimmy Butler makes his debut for the Warriors. Plus, we play a game of sus or sustainable. The Philadelphia 76ers, how long can they do this thing with the big three? That's coming up just ahead. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Skims. Did you know that Skims now makes underwear for men, bringing the same attention to quality and comfort that they're known for? Well, now you do. The men's line offers something for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance of comfort and style. Finding underwear that fits well, stays in place, and moves with you throughout the day can be a real challenge. Skims solves that with lightweight, high-quality materials that provide all-day comfort, whether you're working out, traveling, or just going about your daily life. Shop Skims Men's at skims.com and Skims stores. Let them know that we sent you. After you place that order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu, Locked On NBA. And if you're looking for the perfect gift for Valentine's Day, it's coming up. The clock is ticking. If you're looking for a perfect gift for yourself, Skims just launched their best Valentine's shop ever, available in sizes for women, men, kids, and even pets. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter. Go to LockedOnDaily.com and subscribe to stay up to date with local expert analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On Fantasy Basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Okay, let's play a little post-trade deadline sus or sustainable, one of our favorite games here on Locked On NBA, and we are going to start with the Philadelphia 76ers, currently 11th place in the Eastern Conference, losers of 3 straight despite having their big three available to play. Here's Kayla Santiago of Locked On Sixers after a loss to the Detroit Pistons over the weekend.
Just wasn't there. The one thing about Joel Embiid that really frustrated me in this game was the fact that he has 3 first-half points. He explodes in the third quarter, yes, but him getting up and down the floor, you could tell maybe he wasn't trying to go after those boards. Granted, he did get into a little bit of foul trouble in the beginning, but then he goes over to the sideline on one particular play and then starts going out at Kelly Oubre. And my thought process is that maybe on that singular play, Kelly Oubre and the rest of the team was jogging back, but Joel Embiid cannot be yelling at people when he's also doing the exact same thing. But clearly this team is frustrated overall.
Okay, they would follow up that loss with an 8-point loss to the Giannis-less Bucks on Sunday. During that game, Lisa Salter spoke to Joel Embiid, who reportedly said that it will likely take another surgery and a long recovery period to get his knee right. So Hayes, we'll start with you. The Philadelphia 76ers staying the course with this version of the Big Three, sus or sustainable?
Sus. Very, 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 very sus. I think that they're going to be looking to make a major move this offseason. I don't know if that includes maybe doing something crazy like moving off Joel Embiid, maybe just moving Paul George and some pieces. I don't know exactly what that's going to be, but I do think that even after this core is one and done. I think that they're going to be trying to make some improvements and some pretty big changes this offseason. You just can't better. I get it. Injuries happen. It's out of control for a while. But I just think that with the hopes that they had coming into this, they built something that they could win, even if Joel Embiid went down. You unfortunately built that with another player that's very, very injury prone as well in Paul George. So I think that they're going to make to look some sizable move this offseason.
What's the amount of pain that you're willing to tolerate? What's the amount of pain that Sixers fans are willing to tolerate? And they've tolerated a lot just through the process, right? And through this entire saga, the disappointments and then the injuries. You know, if you're going to do it, you got to go the whole way, which is you tear everything down to the studs this summer and you sit Joel all of next season. And then you try and load up in the summer of 2026 for one run in 26-27. It's the only way to do this. Now that sounds sus with where Joel Embiid's at. You're right. But that to me is like the only way you can do this. You just got to give him 18 months off of basketball, have him not do anything for 6 months and then ramp his way back up while you remake the team around Joel. I don't know. Can you do that with Tyrese Maxey? Is that fair to him? These are tough questions, but I don't know any other way because trying to make this work has been so disappointing and frustrating for everyone involved. And it's honestly like, it's really sad to hear Embiid talk about it. You could tell how heartbroken he is over his inability. Like, I just can't imagine how frustrating it's got to be for your body to not cooperate with your spirit.
And well, I have two more questions on this. What do you think the market for, if you wanted to move on from Paul George, would even look like at this point? Because he's making a ton of money and the production hasn't necessarily been there this season. Are they even going to be able to blow this thing up?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? Like if you're willing to give him away for almost nothing, if you're willing to do it for just like emptying cap space, you could probably get it done, right? There's always kind of like okay, sure, for that value, we'll do it. But you have to be willing to take back almost nothing. Because in the CBA, you just can't do it. It used to be you would trade Paul George and you would get back, all right, we'll get like a couple, even the worst case scenario, get back a couple good players and then a couple good picks. And now it's just like, nope, that's a lot of money to go on our books. You have to pay us for that. Another reason why I just really think the CBA sucks.
Hayes, what does it say that we haven't heard anything from the team as it relates to any kind of surgery or long recovery time? We're hearing this from Embiid, but we haven't heard that at all from the 76ers. What does that tell you?
I mean, they got fined talking about injuries earlier in the season, so I'm not too surprised by that. Like, just deal with it at the end of the season. I mean, I don't know what coming out and saying it at this point. Like, I don't think anybody's really surprised to hear that Joel Embiid may need another surgery or anything like that. Like, it's just an unfortunate side effect of Joel Embiid. So I'm not going to make a lot of out of it. Them not saying much right now because at this point, like, what would saying anything do? It's not going to change anything. It's not going to change the perception. It's not going to make fans any less upset with how this season has gone. It's not going to make the situation any better for Joel Embiid. So I don't hold it against them that they haven't said much yet.
Speaking of struggling teams in the Eastern Conference, the New York Knicks right now, unlike the Sixers, they looked like world beaters early in the season. Let's go to Locked On Knicks for their reaction after a blowout loss to the Boston Celtics on Saturday.
Cannot help but have existential questions about this team that was built and is now unlike last year, like when we were competing with, I said we shouldn't say that, when they were competing with Boston, and it felt like they maybe were a step below them, but that was okay because it was like, hey, we have all these picks, we have all this flexibility going forward, we will figure out over time how to beat this team. Now the Knicks are all in, and they've had 2 shots at the Celtics, and they've lost by a combined 60 points. If you want to zoom out even further, they played 8 halves against the 2 best teams in the NBA, in the Thunder and the Celtics. They have looked competitive for exactly 1 of those 8 halves so far.
Matt, the Knicks making a real playoff run at this point. Sus or sustainable?
I'm going to say sus right now, man. Like, when watching their defense, I just don't see it. And look, they're without OG this weekend, and that makes a huge difference. I get it. They're going to get Mitchell Robinson back, and that helps. I get it. But a lot of it is that last season they were so tenacious defensively, and they were such dogs, and everyone loved them. And they sacrificed that identity to try and build the kind of team that could beat Boston. They added another wing in Mikal Bridges who can switch 1-5, and they added a stretch 5 in Karl Anthony Towns. But in doing so, it's really shocking how one switch of a player can just change everything about your defense, because instead of it being Brunson and 4 great defenders, it's Brunson and Towns and 3 good defenders. And that switch has really compromised them. They have shown zero capacity to contain these high-powered offenses. They just can't contain them, Hayes. And if you can't show me that you're capable of playing defense at that level, I just can't buy into you.
I'm going to always give a little bit of trust towards a Tom Thibodeau coach team. That's just kind of the way that I lean. I think Tibbs is just that kind of coach. He adjusts really well, and usually he can find a way to get the most defensively out of a team. Whatever the most is, it could still be bad, but he finds a way to squeeze the most defensively out of a team at the right moments. There's still a team that it's not like they're still losing a whole bunch of games, right? They're still like 9-4 in their last 13. Like they're still winning more games than not. I'm going to lean some trust into Tom Thibodeau. I'm going to lean definitely some trust into Jalen Brunson, because we've seen the tear that he can go on when he's fully healthy. So I'm still going to say that this team can go on a run in the postseason, but that margin, that belief is getting less and less the further this goes on for this team.
I'll push back a little bit on Tibbs being flexible here. He doesn't make adjustments. He just does the same stuff. Problem with his teams have always been they don't have a higher gear. Didn't have it in Chicago. Didn't have it in New York. Didn't have it in Minnesota. They don't have another gear because he pushes them so hard, and that's the only gear that they've got. I've never seen him really be able to come out and win a series where he was a dog, except for the Cleveland series where they had matchup advantages, and honestly, JB Bickerstaff butchered that series. So, like, I just can't get there. I don't trust Tibbs to make the adjustments necessary.
Let us know what you think on YouTube, youtube.com/@LockedOnNBA. Hit up the comments, like, subscribe the videos. I've got a few more sus or sustainable questions about 2 teams, the Rockets and the Wolves. That's coming up. Plus, Jimmy Butler makes his debut for the Warriors, and the Oklahoma City Thunder get Chet back. He plays for the first time since November. What's the scarier ad? OKC getting Chet back or the Warriors adding Jimmy Butler? I'll ask Matt and Hayes that next on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, live bets can be placed throughout the game. If you miss the opening tip-off, you want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, stay in the action. Looking for a bigger payout? Combine live bets into a same-game parlay. And I was looking at some NBA Finals odds on FanDuel Sportsbook. Boston Celtics they're not a heavy favorite, but they're still the favorite, along with the Oklahoma City Thunder to come out of the West and the East. Cleveland Cavaliers not far behind. The New York Knicks sitting at plus 1,300. We just talked about them. So with FanDuel, live bets can be placed throughout the game, and right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if their first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for a shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. More Locked On NBA ahead. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every single day. Maybe you're checking out Locked On Game Night. They are recapping every game every night. It is on this feed, so if you're subscribed already, then you're going to get those recaps. All right, let's hang with sus or sustainable, because I've got questions about 2 remaining teams. The Houston Rockets, they get a win. They get off the schneid. But their offense still seems to be struggling to score, and struggling to score particularly in the clutch. So the Rockets making a real playoff run. Same question as I asked about the Knicks, sus or sustainable, Matt?
I'm going to go sus. I think this team's going to drop off a little bit. I'm actually expecting them maybe to fall all the way into the play-in tournament. There's just like a lot of signs that this team isn't as good under the hood as their record indicates. What you're kind of seeing, I think, is a little bit of the regression here from Jalen Green in the clutch. They don't know who they're going to, man. Like, should they go to Alperen Şengün? Should they go to Amen Thompson? Should they go to Jalen Green? They don't know. And without that guy, it's been really difficult. You throw in the fact that without Fred VanVleet, they are just very disorganized and lost. This team still needs that veteran presence. Without that guy, I think it'll be tough down the stretch. I think that some of these shooting numbers will regress a little bit defensively. I'm not saying the Rockets are done. They can definitely get this together, and they're still tough as nails, and they're really fun, but I do think it's suspect that they can make a real playoff run, Hayes.
I go back to what Ime Udoka said not too long ago, and looking at Anthony Edwards and saying that it must be nice to have a player that you can go to just get a bucket in the clutch like that, and they are missing that. Now, with the Rockets, they do have the defense, right? They do have that you can look and say that maybe that could be the thing that they hang their hat on, but young teams usually do find a way to start dropping off, and so I'm definitely going to call it sus here. I think that they're gonna come to the National. They're already ahead of schedule, and it's still a win overall from them. And them finishing the season and getting to take a look at really what they need. They got young players. If they need to go out and get somebody who's a big time scorer, they can do that. If they need to use assets to go out there and get a point guard, they can do that, right? So they have the capability and the assets to go out there and get what they need. So I don't think they made a mistake by seeing this thing out to the end of the season, but I definitely. I'm gonna maintain my sus. I think that they're not going to get as far as what it looked like they may be able to per their record earlier in the season.
All right, sticking with the sus, let's go to one final team, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They've won 3 straight over Chicago, Houston, and the previously unbeatable Portland Trailblazers, and all without Julius Randle, who is still recovering from the same injury that Anthony Davis went down with, the adductor strain. The Minnesota Timberwolves, without Julius Randle in the lineup, winning again, sus or sustainable, Hayes?
Man, I'm going to actually say sustainable here. I think that now that you don't, and not to say knock on any Julius Randle or anything like that, but I just think that it makes it easier in some other players to step up. So the teams that they've beaten, they beat my Bulls, which isn't anything to write home about. You beat the Portland Trailblazers. So there's, of course, that concern, but I just think that this Timberwolves team is just so talented that eventually that they were going to figure it out. So I'll stay sustainable there just because I want them to be good because I love Anthony Edwards, just to be honest.
I'm going to say sustainable with the caveat of, like, this is with Randall missing. This is the point here. Jaden McDaniels, who I've talked a lot about how all the on-court stuff is really bad with him, it completely changes when Randall's not on the floor because you add another spacer, whether that's Naz Reid or another guard or wing. Everything changes when that combination is not on the floor. When they've got Rudy Gobert, Naz Reid, Anthony Edwards, and Jaden McDaniels on the floor since January 1st, they have a 122 offensive rating, 114 defense for a plus 8.3. They are 10-7 in those games. They've played that lineup. It works. So for me, the big thing here is genuinely they've got to figure out a way to basically build 2 different teams, a Julius Randle subset, and then this other structure that's got everybody else involved. That's a big ask of Chris Finch, but I genuinely think that Julius Randle changes too much of their identity and makes it impossible for them to play Jaden McDaniels.
And I don't know if this has anything to do with the Randle injury or Randle being out, but they're finally getting some decent contributions from some of their young players. Jalen Clark stepping up, Rob Dillingham off the bench. I mean, they contributed 19 points combined in that win over Portland. Make sure to check out Locked on Wolves if you want more on the Wolves turnaround. I want to turn our attention to some debuts, some returns. We've got Chet Holmgren over the weekend, coming back to play for the Oklahoma City for the Thunder for the first time since November, and Jimmy Butler suiting up for the first time in a Warriors uniform. Here's Locked On Warriors host Chuck Walters on how Jimmy looked as a second option to Steph Curry.
I saw one game from Jimmy Butler. It'd been like a month since he'd played like 5 games since Christmas, and I am already convinced that Jimmy's game is going to work better in this system. Disclaimer, it's the honeymoon phase. We all know how the honeymoon phase goes, but we're also in a phase where we got a guy that, like I said, was out of shape. He'd played 5 games since Christmas and came in and balled. 25 points in his first game for the Warriors, got to the free throw line 13 times and nailed 11 of them. Steve Kerr called Jimmy Butler a lion I mean, we're replacing finesse with fire here. We're getting a dog. We need more dogs. And now you have that second option. The Warriors win every single game when they have more than 30 assists. They had 34 in Butler's first game in a Warriors jersey. Coincidence? I don't think so.
Okay, so the Thunder get Chet Holmgren back. The Warriors add Butler via trade. Which team addition should frighten a potential first-round playoff matchup more, Butler or Holmgren, if we're assuming that they reach all of the expectations that these teams want them to reach, Matt?
I mean, it's Holmgren because Chet Holmgren's not washed. So that would be the advantage here is that one player can actually go every game and will not just fall off the map. Jimmy will have a really great game, and then he'll have a really quiet game, and everyone will be like, "That's weird." But remember that awesome game he had, and they'll have another awesome game, and then he'll be very quiet, and then they'll lose, and then they'll be very quiet, and then they'll lose. Then he has a really big game, and you just can't count on him night to night. You just can't. Look back at the history of his playoff runs. It's always big game, quiet, 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 big game, quiet, quiet, quiet. It's very hard for him to string together consecutive big games. Meanwhile, Chet Holmgren is making the best defense in the NBA even better. It adds another weapon offensively on the offensive glass and from range. Yeah, I'm sorry, Chet Holmgren's a lot more important here.
I think the key thing that I'm going to key in on here is Doug saying for a first-round playoff series. I think that any team in the first round should be afraid of the Thunder anyway, right? If the Golden State Warriors can get up to the playoffs, right, and make it out the play-in, and they face a team in the first round other than the OKC Thunder, which would take a lot for them to do, I think that they should be terrified. Like if the Memphis Grizzlies right now at 2, if the Golden State Warriors end up getting up somehow to 7, coming out that play-in, and they got to take on them in the first round, I think the Memphis Grizzlies should be concerned about that. Yes, Jimmy is a wildly inconsistent player. Yes, Jimmy is a player that's on the back end and sliding in his career. But when you look at overall what he's bringing to this team, he's on there with other wily vets, a really good coach. And I think Jimmy's going to be motivated, at least this first year, to prove all the doubters wrong and why he wanted to get out there. And a motivated Jimmy is a dangerous Jimmy. So I'm going to say just by the nature of just in the first round, because they would be a lower seed and surprise someone, I'll say Jimmy Butler, because any team should be terrified of the Thunder regardless.
Counter, can't play the Milwaukee Bucks in the Western Conference first round, so that takes away
the Milwaukee Bucks and Memphis Grizzlies. Sorry about that. Oh, well, no. Yeah, because he usually kills the Milwaukee Bucks. That's what you mean.
I mean, he pretty much only kills Milwaukee Bucks.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, let's close by going into the group chat. Matt, you had a very interesting question involving the Oklahoma City Thunder. Do you want to share it and maybe share some of your reasoning behind the question?
Yeah, so the question is is it dumber to doubt the Thunder if they win the title, or is it to believe in them if they get bounced in the first round? This is part of the content business, right? Is because you're always concerned about those cold takes, but you just got to be honest with your analysis. But I am just kind of wondering this is if you get to the end of the season and you're like, man, I really believe that the Thunder were good and they got tossed in the first round by Jimmy Butler. Or if you're looking at it and you're like, I really thought that they were frauds and somebody was going to catch them. And the Thunder were just better than everybody else. The entire season, they told us that they were better than everybody else. And then they were better than everybody else. Which would make you feel dumber for not believing or believing in?
Hayes, what do you think?
Oh, man. I think I feel dumber not believing that they are who they've shown to be, that they are better than everyone else. I think that I'm a very big analytic guy, and I think that's whole true. So I'm going to believe that they're better than everyone else. I would feel dumber if I didn't believe in that, and then they ended up being that good when all the signs were there that they've been that good all season long.
I don't think you should ever feel dumb for believing in a team, particularly a young team. If they get bounced early, that to me feels part of the process. We've seen this over and over over the course of the NBA. So I guess by virtue of that, I think it would be dumber to doubt the Thunder and then they win the title, because certainly they have enough talent and are winning games at a rate that would suggest that they would be title contenders.
That's interesting. I don't really know the answer. I can't figure it out right now, because there are a lot of concerns I have with OKC, but they're ephemeral things where it's everyone's well, I don't know if Lou Dort and Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins are going to hit these open shots in the playoffs. And I'm how do you tell? How do you know? And it's well, the Mavericks series and the Bucks play-in game. And I'm those are very isolated situations. How do you really tell? I would love to know what people think over at youtube.com/LockedOnNBA.
Let us know in the comments. Maybe later this week we will get to a few of those. If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Locked On NBA wherever you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. Enjoy tonight's action. Thanks to Matt and Hayes for their expertise. Be kind to each other, and we're going to see you right back here on Tuesdays, Locked On NBA.